Hey guys, Shadowrek here with tips, tricks, and things you just may not know about Demon Hunter Part 2. I do already have Part 1 completed, and that will be in the description down below the video, where you can find a link to that video. Now, this one is mostly going to cover some things regarding movement and movement abilities, as there's very unintuitive things that are not mentioned anywhere in-game about them, as well as a lot more into the utility side, where the last video focused a lot more on damage. So, let's get right into that. Now, the first thing that I do want to look at is Vengeful Retreat. So, Vengeful Retreat is not on the global cooldown. And what that means is a global cooldown in World of Warcraft is, if you look at the bottom here, anytime I hit a button, everything goes on cooldown, except for some very small amount of abilities. Usually, this is something like, well, you can actually see here, Blur, which is a defensive, Vengeful Retreat, Taunt, Shadow Meld, sometimes some Trinkets. Those will not go on global cooldown. And the global cooldown is 1.5 seconds. Which is actually something that, at least with my add-on here, I can go and find. It's 1.5 seconds, and then your haste reduces it. So if I I-beam, you can see that goes down. When I get Furious Gaze, it's going to go down even more. However, Vengeful Retreat is not on the global cooldown. But Vengeful Retreat does put a cooldown on Fell Rush, Fell Blade, and Glide. So when I press Vengeful Retreat, what you'll see is that Fell Blade and Fell Rush down here at the bottom specifically will become unavailable for 0.75 of a second. It's a little bit shorter for Fell Blade than it is for Fell Rush. I believe it's 0.75 for Fell Blade and 1.0 seconds for Fell Rush and Glide. I'm not sure why they made it shorter when they locked it out on Fell Blade specifically, but part of the reason was stated so for movement builds that it wouldn't always be correct to Fell Blade instead of Fell Rush when it came to Unbound Chaos. This is actually very important to note, as a lot of the time when people are playing movement builds, they don't learn proper movement, which is, like stepping to the side of a pack and then vengefuling away so that you can keep using globals in the air, because again, it's not on global, so you can be hitting buttons while going through the air. But when you use Vengeful and then plan to just Fell Blade back, Fell Blade is put on cooldown while you're not in a GCD, and then you're Fell Blading to cancel it once it comes up. And if you aren't in a global already when you press Vengeful, you're essentially just losing 0.75 of a second, which is usually half a global. Plus, Fell Blade in and of itself is not a great global, and that very likely is not needed for Fury at the time when you're Vengeful retreating, so it's pretty much just bad. On that same vein, Fell Blade and Fell Rush also don't have the same global cooldown. So, as I mentioned before, the global cooldown is 1.4 seconds. However, if I press Fell Rush or Fell Blade, you're going to notice that was not 1.4 seconds between that and my next global. I can Fell Blade, Sigil. Fell Rush and Fell Blade only have a 0.5 second global cooldown. The reason for this is, at least in terms of Fell Rush, it is more of a movement ability. It used to be 0.25. The reason it was increased is because with a 0.25 second lockout, it has something with the server-side movement where your character's locked out for about 0.15 to 0.2 of a second, and this was causing issues in movement builds where your ping heavily affected your damage output, as you couldn't actually spell Q abilities if you weren't well below 50 ping. So that got upped to 0.5 of a second, which is a lot more forgiving in terms of that. And then Fell Blade at some point was changed from being a full global to that half-second global, which does feel pretty nice to have. With that, though, it's not lowered by haste, so it'll always be 0.5 of a second. And even if you have 100% haste, where your regular globals come down to 0.75, which is the regular minimum, it will still be a 0.5 second GCD on Fell Rush and Fell Blade. Next, I'm just going to go into movement. This is going to be about jump, double jump, and glide. So, one thing is, for typical movement on Demon Hunter, It is fastest not to run, but to glide. And you can see a clear difference in my move speed when I do glide, and this will be even more noticeable if I untalent Pursuit very quickly. And you're going to, see a massive drop in how fast I do run here. And my run speed's down to 107%, but when I glide, it's much faster. Glide is about 160% move speed. So in every case, it's going to be faster to be just spamming your spacebar and jump gliding, and even if that glide gets ended, you keep the momentum at 160% move speed. And mixed between that, Fell Rush, Fell Blade, you're going to be able to move extremely quickly, but the very large upside to specifically doing jump gliding, and just, double jump gliding, you're not using a GCD. Nothing is getting locked out, except for a little blip where Fell Rush can't be pressed, so you can continue using globals for movement while you're doing damage. If a target is moving and you're going along with it, you can keep jumping and gliding while pressing all your buttons, and still get full damage out while having good movement. Let me swap that talent back before I accidentally go an M+ without 30% move speed, because that would make me a little sad when I'm dodging at times. The next one that I have is about the fact that you can jump and double jump during I-beam. So I'm going to cover more on this later as well, but there are a lot of mechanics in World of Warcraft that, when they're a ground mechanic, you can double jump them. This doesn't go for every mechanic, but there are a lot that this works on, or a lot of them also can be basically a sphere. So if you were to kind of use this as a 2D representation of the ground, what I mean is if there's a ground circle that has a middle point where my character is, it may actually be hitting in a bubble, going kind of up and around. So if you're on one of the sides as opposed to the middle, and you double jump, you can get over the circle that it hits. And that's very useful when you're I-beaming, because sometimes a circle comes up under you that you're in the side of, and all you have to do is jump, and you can glide out of it too. So it's something very useful, the fact that you have access to, if you're I-beaming, you can just jump, and then you could be spamming your spacebar, and it'll glide as soon as it's done. Glide won't cancel your I-beam, but you can do a regular jump and a double jump in that, which will let you dodge a lot of ground effects, and gliding out of it usually means you can move to where you need to be without any risk, allowing you to finish that I-beam. That's something I'd say is actually very, very important to know. In terms of Mythic Plus, sometimes Raid, but typically more for Mythic Plus, there's going to be a lot of ground mechanics popping up at various times, and there is a lot of times where you may feel like you need to cancel I-beam. And doing so, you're going to lose a lot of damage outright in the ability. You're also not going to get your Furious Gaze, so you'll lose more damage there. So definitely something to keep in mind, because you don't always have to cancel I-beam just because something spawned under you. Next, I'm going to be going into what I'm going to call the utility section. This is kind of random bits of information that are maybe good or useful to know. However, they don't necessarily fit into any real category. So, the first one I'm going to start with is a bit of a meme question that I get asked a lot more than I feel like I should, and I don't know how many people are just memeing about it versus how many are serious. So, when talking about weapons that can be used, all weapons that Havoc can use and equip are the exact same. Now, I'm not talking about if there is a special weapon, there's none this tier, but one that has like a proc effect or something like that. But what I am talking about is if it's a weapon that you can use and it just has, stats on it, then they're all going to be the exact same. It's going to have the same amount of agility at the same item level, it'll have the same amount of total stats, it'll have the same weapon DPS. The damage range might be slightly different, and that doesn't matter at all. These are all going to be pretty much the exact same no matter what. The only thing that does matter is that it is, in fact, an agility weapon. If you, for example, craft a charged rune axe as opposed to the charged slicer, instead of being an agility and strength weapon with 1400 weapon DPS, it now has int only, no main stat for you, and half the weapon DPS. That said, this is kind of changing next expansion. Not that all the weapons won't share the same amount of stats and everything for Havoc. However, you are specifically going to want to craft a Warglaive if you want to be flexible. The reasoning for that is going into Midnight, we're gaining the Devourer spec, which is intellect-based instead of agility-based. However, they will share use of Warglaives. So the one weapon that will convert between Havoc and Devourer will be Warglaives that will have both agility and intellect and should work perfectly fine for both Devourer and Havoc. It's possible they could backtrack or change this by the time this hits live and entirely change this, but for now it seems like Warglaives are just going to work between both, which means at least for Midnight forward, you're always going to want Warglaives, whereas right now, it doesn't matter at all. You can do something for flavor, like you just want to have a sword equipped. You could do something because that was the kind of blacksmith you could find. You could do it because one of them is slightly cheaper than the other based on the craft mats. Doesn't matter, they're all the exact same. Another mechanic that Havoc has access to is with Sigil of Misery plus Shadow Meld. This is something that is popularly used for Eldrazi Reaver already as it spawns a soul, but simply if you Sigil of Misery mobs, and obviously it's mobs that have to be able to be stunned, when you Shadow Meld, they will just drop whatever they had going on. No combat, nothing. And because they're forced in combat with you, when you do put your Sigil of Misery on them, it means that your team can just run directly over top of them, anything can be dragged past without issue. You just have the 15 seconds of that fear to get past, and then press Meld, and it'll all be good. So, this is a clip of just using Netherwalk and Meld for skips. This isn't particularly useful in a lot of places at the moment, but it can always be useful in the future. And I'm going to double it up with Sigil of Misery as well. So, say your team needs to run through and use this, then you can pull this down, Netherwalk, and play all this together. And after your team has clicked up, you would run forward and Shadow Meld, and you can click yourself. Now, in this, you can see at least I didn't get combat again, but this is just a normal dungeon where I have not actually cleared all the way through, so I can't click to go up. The only time that I do currently use this season isn't actually here anymore, because they did buff the count that you get from this mob and make it worth pulling. But I do it at the end of Gambit every time, where I Netherwalk run through with a Starseer, and then I get enough distance away to Shadow Meld. The one thing about it is you always want to Fell Rush after that Netherwalk falls, because you'd want to, get distance. It says they don't stealth detect. I believe these mobs do. Same thing with the commander. You need to be far enough away when you Shadow Meld for aggro to actually drop. Now, this is one that I have been asked before, and I'm not really sure why people would have the idea that Blade Dance does work this way, because you would die all the time. But I did want to make a note that Blade Dance does not move your character's hitbox. So, regardless of the animation, your character is always centered to where you are. So, you can see even here, when I press Immolation Auras and then I press Blade Dance, despite the fact that my character goes in range by animation, the Immolation Auras will not hit. It doesn't matter, your character's always in the same spot, you're not actually going anywhere. That's also why your camera stays in place. It's not like Killing Spree worked for Outlaw Rogue. Not something to worry about at all. It's simply an animation. You are standing directly where you were the whole time. As you can see right here, you ping on your head, the ping stays in the same place. Same thing, if there's a marker on your head and you press Blade Dance or Death Sweep, the marker doesn't move because your character is still there. The next thing that you may not know is about Blur. So, Blur mentions on the tooltip that it increases your chance to dodge by 50% and reduces all damage taken by 20%. Now, chance to dodge is very vague, but dodge chance in World of Warcraft typically only blocks direct physical hits. It's very spotty what kinds of abilities can and cannot be dodged. So obviously auto swings, things like the pot shot from the sharpshooter, but also the spear from the knight can be dodged. So when I press Blur, you can see my dodge chance here. I have a 71.6% chance, and I didn't get the debuff. No spear, the spear went past me. Now, the reason I have 71.6% is I have 21.6 default, Blur adds 50% onto that, and that is something that you just end up with a very high dodge chance. So this one, 20% chance to dodge it natty, I don't dodge it, I get the bleed. But again, it's just going to be that when I blur, I do have that 71% chance to dodge, and there are certain mechanics that works on that it is very important to realize that that's a thing. That's also the exact reason why we did not keep Blade Dance dodge, because it would let you evade those mechanics with Blade Dance 100% of the time. One of the things I want to go over is how Netherwalk is not an immunity, and you will get debuffed. This is unlike Meta Immune, which is immunity. So, if I Meta Immune the last second on this mechanic, I don't get hit, I don't get any form of a debuff, and nothing happens. Now I'm going to wait for that mechanic to come back, and I will Netherwalk the next one and show the debuff that it gives. So basically, Netherwalk, the way that it works is it's just a 100% damage reduction while while the buff is up on you. However, you also can't attack. There are a couple things that you can cast in Netherwalk that I will mention as well, but they typically will not deal damage. So, when this comes out, I'm now going to press Netherwalk here, and the abilities you can cast are Sigil of Flame, which deals damage, you can I-Beam, which doesn't deal damage, and you can throw Glaive in it, which also doesn't deal damage. And you can see here, even though I Netherwalked it and I didn't take damage, I did get the Faded debuff, which pretty much any mechanic that you're thinking of, that will be how it works. Unless it's something that, like, and usually this is only tank hits that are designed this way, unless it's something like percent of damage is dealt based on the damage you took. It's not going to do anything against debuffs. So, if it's something that applies a long debuff to you, Netherwalk will not do anything helpful, whereas if it's for a life and death situation stopping a massive hit, like Cosmic Singularity, even though you're going to get debuffed, it's good to do, it still is notable that it just is not an immunity. And finally, I'm going to end on our self-healing. Specifically, this is going to be about Charred Warblades, the talent that is you heal for 3% of all fire damage you deal, and our Leech. So first, Charred Warblades, healing for 3% of all fire damage you deal. Chaos is an amalgamation of most magic damage types, pretty much all of them except for Holy and Physical aren't included. Sometimes Physical is. That means fire is included in all damage that is chaos. So if I come into my damage in a specific window, and you know, it can come into this window here, all of the damage that's chaos or fire will count as fire damage, and 3% of it will heal me. So I can go in and look at Charred Warblades. Obviously I didn't take damage here, so it didn't heal me, but I can look at overhealing because it will generate when you overheal still. And Charred Warblades ticks every 1 second. Notably, this does not work the same as 3% Leech does. Leech works differently from Charred Warblades in a couple ways. So, one, if we look in this window here, you would expect that Leech and Charred Warblades would have the same amount of ticks, but that's not the case. This is during a Shadow Decay on second boss in Dawnbreaker, where you're taking a massive amount of damage every second. But if I go back and look at the healing done, we only see Leech ticks in 5 different spots, where we have 7 Charred Warblades ticks, including ones that were entirely overhealing at the start and at the end. Now, what's notable with that is, unlike Leech, Charred Warblade will generate a healing event, even if it does not heal you. So, if it's just overhealing, it will be building up, and if you take damage before it's ticked a second later, you'll get the healing on that damage that was taken. So, like, if I take damage at, like I did here, if I take damage at 9.5 seconds, then I'll have a tick waiting for me at 10.0. Leech does not work this way. Leech ticks every 1.1 seconds. It's 1.1 to 1.2 seconds. It's spaced out a little bit more, and that means that you don't get a Leech tick for every tick of damage on damage events that are on a 1 second cadence, which is really common in WoW, and this is something that can kill you through Leech very frequently. However, if you look at the healing done, you'll notice it only shows up in healing if there was healing to do. It will overheal you because you can have massive leech ticks like this one that was almost 11 million, but if a leech tick is only going to be overhealing and you're at max health, it will not generate a leech tick. There's only going to be ones with positive numbers here. What's notable about that is if you take damage and your health bar drops, you won't be leeching from it instantly. And let's use this Abyssal Blast right here as an example. I'm not going to leech right away from it because leech isn't building. But you can see Charred Warblades instantly taking on me first. I take the damage, and Charred Warblades is then working. Whereas leech is going to pop up later because it takes 1.2 seconds from when I initially took damage and dropped below max health. So leech isn't something that's rolling healing on you at all times, whereas Charred Warblades is. So Charred Warblades is just stronger than leech because it ticks faster and it generates even if it is overhealing you, whereas leech does not work that way. The hunt is also separate from this. The hunt works on its own. This is something that is being removed in Midnight, however, but the hunt is simply for a 30-second window when you hunt, or maybe it's 20 seconds now, you gain 10% leech from damage dealt to that target, and it seems that every damage event does work, and it will heal you for incredibly small amounts and constantly spam you with healing in the log. You can see that literally within the span of a second, sometimes there is 6 to 7 damage events that happened, and that healing occurs on all of them. So if you're looking at Leech or Charred Warblades in this window, you're going to see 13 ticks of Charred Warblades, 8 ticks of Leech, but 126 ticks of the Hunt. So all the healing works in different ways, and this is part of the reason why, in my opinion, Charred Warblades is so good, and notably does a lot more than you would expect considering it's only a 3%, whereas typically for Leech, I have 20% in a lot of windows. Thank you for watching my tips, tricks, and things you just may not know about Havoc Demon Hunter, Part 2. I appreciate everyone watching this video, and if you'd like to watch me live, you can at twitch.tv/Shotarek. If you want to keep up with my content, both on Havoc Demon Hunter and just general WoW news, and possibly some Devourer as well going into Midnight, then I'd appreciate if you followed my channel. Until next time, have a good one.